Welcome to Indus Special. I'm Ejaz Haider. Pakistan has come a long way in its war on terror from the time that we got into this messy situation in 2002, which was in the wake of US-led coalition's invasion of Afghanistan. The years from 2002 through 2007 saw multiple small and large operations in what was known as federally administered tribal areas, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan. There was much confusion then. Security forces personnel, for the most part, were not ready for fighting among the people. Post-Red Mosque operation in 2007, Pakistan has seen a spate of terror attacks against both soft and hard targets. By 2009, the conglomerate that came to designate itself Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan held control of several administrative areas in then FATA. But Pakistan pushed back in 2009 with a well-thought strategy beginning with Malakand Division, clearing the areas of Upper and Lower Swat Valley, Bonair and Lower Dir. The next operation to come was in South Waziristan. Pakistan also improved its intelligence gathering capabilities as also its fighting capacity. Operation Zarb-e-Azb, and Zarb-e-Azb referred to the Prophet's sword, peace be upon him, and later Raddul Fasad, eradication of mischief or anarchy, have continued to notch successes, and while terrorist attacks cannot be entirely eradicated, the numbers, frequency and damage have largely been curbed. Much work, of course, still needs to be done. How did we fare in 2018? What distance have we covered in the past 16 years? What more needs to be done, etc. are questions we will discuss today. We are joined by former Inspector General Police Shaukat Javed, former Brigadier Asad Munir, former Major General Saad Khattak, Dr. Moisef, Associate Vice President South Asia at the United States Institute of Peace, and Rahimullah Yusufzai, Resident Editor, The News Peshawar. According to some estimates, 60,000 people have been killed in hundreds of terror attacks in Pakistan. A presumptive estimate of losses says Pakistan has lost some $108 billion in its decade-and-a-half war on terror. Pakistan has killed 17,600 militants in operations. That's the number given by Foreign Office. And it has also cleared 46,378 kilometers of land area from terrorist groups. And in 2015, terrorism incidents declined up to 45% in Pakistan, and Pakistan conducted something like 91,666 military operations between 2014 and 2018. Let's kick off with IGP Shaukat Javed. What have we learned? Because when we started this, we weren't really sure, the security forces weren't very sure about who the enemy was, why were we fighting people, many of whom had been part of a policy, strategic policy at some point. So we have come a long distance since then. But what were our weaknesses and how did we overcome those weaknesses?
Ejaz, I think you very rightly said that there were military operations and which improved the situation. I would say that military operations or kinetic operations, they were very large in number, and they were successful also, and they achieved many successes. But the place where we lack is the civilian response.
Okay.
And that is one area where we very badly we are lacking. We don't have a proper internal security policy till today, though we have launched two of them, one in 2014 and the other one probably last year. Yeah. And but there is no mechanism how to oversee the conduct of various actors who are supposed to perform various functions under the policy. The main institution or main office which we have for this purpose is NECTA. And NECTA, unfortunately, till today is not fully functional. There was in the last couple of years, there was a very energetic chief of NECTA by the name of Ehsan Ghani. Yeah. And he put a lot of life in it. But still, the present government, in the very first board meeting, which was supposed to be held obtained number of years ago, in the board meeting, it was decided to rethink and to reevaluate the...
You're talking about the Board of Governors.
The Board of Governors meeting. Yeah. This was a very good step on the part of present government and the Prime Minister Imran Khan, that this meeting did take place.
Finally.
Finally. But a committee was formed during that meeting to evaluate the functioning of NECTA and to reconsider the organizational structure, etc. So far, we have not.
But here's the point: there is already a NACTA Act, and so if they really want to reconfigure it, then they will have to take it to Parliament. They will have to amend the Act. And interestingly enough, NACTA kept performing in terms of salaries and office expenditure and the rest of it, which was illegal because the Board of Governors meeting had never taken place until now. So all of that expenditure was essentially illegal.
Ejaz, you can gauge the seriousness of the people at the helm of the affairs, that even after holding of the first Board of Governors meeting, we are not acting on the Act. The Act says the NACTA will function in the Prime Minister's office, and it will report directly to the Prime Minister. I have on a number of occasions reiterated this stance, that the National Security Advisor should be the person whom should they report, and he should brief the Prime Minister on, if not daily basis, on periodical basis. So far, no concrete steps.
So far, that has not happened.
It is still in the Ministry of Interior.
Yes,
and
because there is an executive committee and
the premier intelligence agencies, they refuse to report to Ministry of Interior because they already report to the Prime Minister, the chief executive of the country.
Absolutely.
And its proper place is the chief Prime Minister's secretary.
Although at this particular point in time, the Interior Minister's portfolio is also held by the Prime Minister. But yes, this is an important point. Let me take this to Brigadier Asad Munir. Brigadier Munir, since you conducted intelligence-based operations in FATA and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and have also been looking at how we have fared, so what is your sense of what we did in 2018, and also to juxtapose it against the 16 years, the distance that we have traveled from 2002 up until now?
I think the mistake we made that the state had not confronted such a situation in the past. There were not so many, foreign terrorists and our own people fighting against the army. So the people at the helm, they could not make a decision whether to conduct operation against them or whether to talk to them. So there were different views. So initially it started with operation. Initially we talked to them, and once we knew that the tribal, they cannot, handle and they cannot get rid of these terrorists. So the operation was launched. But then somebody came with the idea that, in tribal area, it is things are always resolved with negotiation. So the negotiation, so it was a mix of negotiation and operation. I think the right time to conduct an operation was 2002 and 2003. Once the Taliban were few in a number, Pakistani Taliban, and they were only in the North Waziristan and Orakzai agency. There were no Talib at that time in South Waziristan agency. So I think a division plus force could have handled it. And before they got organized and they captured our areas, and they were ruling almost 19 administrative units. So if we had conducted that operation at that time, I think 60,000 people may not have died. And
that's a very important point. Stay with me, Brigadier Munir, because I have also been joined by Dr. Mohid Yusuf, who, as I said, is Associate Vice President of South Asia at the USIP. Dr. Yusuf, we are just discussing primarily the 2018 counterterrorism efforts, but also in the broader perspective of when the war started back in 2002. From Washington, what exactly is the scenario in terms of how people feel about Pakistan's counterterrorism efforts in the last 16 years?
Thank you, Ejaz. I mean, you're asking me to reflect on what Washington thinks, so I'm going to give you that without passing a value judgment on that. Essentially, the view in the U.S. is that Pakistan has done a lot of things that have been very useful. So unfortunately, I mean, you ask what the view is, and the view is, fairly negative, if not decidedly negative on this. Now, I would also add, and this is the analytical part, that there's been a very simple problem from day one. The goals of the two sides and how they saw Project Afghanistan sort of proceeding have been divergent. The American interest in the beginning was Al-Qaeda. Pakistan and the U.S. worked together. There is no other country that's done more on that with the U.S. When it came to the Taliban, the interests diverged. And they diverged because Pakistan's ultimate hope was that you'd have the moderate Taliban in the mix in Afghanistan. You would have India largely out of Afghanistan so that there's no threat for Pakistan from the western border. And you would have an American sort of association in terms of economic support, but not necessarily major bases sitting there which Pakistan feels may be threatening its nuclear program, etc. The U.S. interest, of course, was a new project. It was a modern Afghan state that would become an ally in an otherwise turbulent region, and over time also for the establishment, military bases, military presence, and thus the strategic interest in a region where they have a lot of foes and competitors. And those two could never converge because they were inherently contradictory to each other in terms of the interests of U.S. and Pakistan. So that's why you have this negative view. Quite frankly, I think if Pakistan did everything that the U.S. asked, the U.S. would have praised Pakistan much more. There perhaps would have been more resistance, but the backlash in Pakistan may have been more, even more. And if the U.S. did everything Pakistan asked, it would be going directly against its largest strategic picture in which it wants India to become the counterweight to China. So this is realist politics. This is essentially realpolitik at its best. Machiavellian states pretending that their interests converge, but they really never did.
Okay, so here's the thing. Early on, Pakistan had been advising the United States also and the US-led coalition countries also that they should try and have the Afghan Taliban, make them a part of the process, starting from the Bonn process. That was one. Secondly, fairly early into Obama's presidency, he realized, and he was on record as saying that we are not here to create a Jeffersonian democracy. Now, if it was all about somehow streamlining Afghanistan, then should Pakistan's and America's interests not have converged at that point?
They should have. So on the first part, the Bonn, I think most people recognize there was a mistake not to include the elements that were not included. But remember, that was a very specific context. The U.S. was a wounded tiger, superpower that wanted, to go in and settle the score once and for all on this. And so at that time, there was no thought that this was going to be a 17-year war. Post-President Obama, when he came in and his sort of surge and then thinking about not going for nation building, yes. The problem there was that within the U.S. system, there was a debate. There was never a consensus whether pulling out on a timeline was the right thing to do, whether the U.S. actually, the system wanted to do what President Obama had said. There was still a division, and some within the system wanted to use negotiations with the Taliban to weaken the Taliban. Others thought that it was beyond that point and they needed to negotiate and get out of there like we are seeing now. And so that debate, I think Pakistan picked up and continued to hedge because it wasn't sure where the U.S. was going to go. And when Pakistan hedged, of course, the U.S. picked up that Pakistan is not doing a number of things it wants, even if it's doing others, and thus this disconnect continued. Now, for the first time, you find Pakistan convinced, the U.S. convinced, and others convinced that there's no other way but to get the Taliban in and have a political settlement. In fact, now your problem is the opposite. There are many who feel that U.S. may actually leave without a settlement, and that may thrust Afghanistan into chaos all over again. So in fact, Pakistan is pushing the U.S. to stick around, get to a settlement in which Pakistan is helping, and then sort of take it from there.
Okay, one final question. How look at, leaving everything aside, how would you look at Pakistan's own counter-terrorism efforts over the years?
Look, I mean, I think kinetically, there is no doubt that where we were before 2013, I mean, it's not too long ago we used to sit down and discuss whether our kids could go to school and would they come back home or not. So, I mean, I think it's been remarkable. There's no question about it. Kinetically, the turnaround is remarkable. The security situation has improved. Here's the problem. There is unequivocal data to show that once you get through the heavy-handed kinetic part, you have ended war but not brought peace to your country unless you do everything that we have listed down in 20 cryptic points in the National Action Plan. Yeah. And so to me, you've got the kinetic piece under control. That's the tactical victory. The strategic victory has to come through a proper, sincere and successful implementation of the National Action Plan over time, That's where we are lagging. That's where most states lag. It's a very difficult sort of task and benchmark to achieve. But I will tell you, Ejaz, that I am increasingly worried that if we show complacency, if we wait for the world to come and put a gun to our head to say that FATF is going to blacklist you if you don't do what you had promised in your National Action Plan, then I wonder whether we can sustain this, given that already we are seeing a little bit of a spike in terrorist incidents in KP and FATA, or FATA specifically. So I think the battle is not over. It's tactically won, strategically still in the balance. And if we take our eye off NAP, the National Action Plan, 2 years from now, I worry that we'd be having another bout of terrorist attacks, which we'd have to deal with kinetically.
Okay, thank you so much. That was Dr. Yusuf, Associate Vice President, South Asia at USIP. Sir, he's saying something very important. So, if you look at the strategic triangle, the three ends, you have physically dominated the areas. But then you have the social psychological dominance at one end, and then you have the fiscal economic dominance at the other end. And so you need to at least cover two ends of the triangle in order to be able to cover the third part of the triangle. And we have seen that we have done one, physical dominance. We have partially moved towards the second one, but it's not, that process is not complete. And internal security is primarily, once the heavy kinetic operations have ended, it's about the police, and it's about the police. And you headed the largest police force in Pakistan. Where does the capacity of the police stand at this point?
No, I think the capacity of police has improved tremendously during the last couple of years, because after the formation of counter-terrorism departments in each province, their coordination with the intelligence agencies and their operations were quite successful, and they were able to apprehend a number of terrorists and very successfully eliminated a number of them in the pockets where they were hiding. Saying this, I would tend to agree with you and with Mohit also, that we formulated a plan, National Action Plan, on the basis of the, after the incident of the
Army Public School.
Yeah. And except for the military actions which were envisaged in that plan, no other action has been taken so far. In some of the points, even the preliminary meetings have not taken place. And I will quote now again, there is a problem area which, according to me, is coming up, that the Chief of Army Staff, every second week, we hear in the news that he has confirmed the death sentence of 20 terrorists, 12 terrorists, and their total number exceeds now 50, I think, and is nearing 50 to 70 and somewhere in between. And we have imposed, self-imposed moratorium on us, probably due to some foreign pressures or etc. But it was a good message which was going to the terrorists, and I think we must restore this.
But the problem is, and let me take this to Brigadier Munir. Brigadier Munir, the problem is that in the 20 points National Action Plan, if I were to put them under three broad heads, it was counter-terrorism, counter-extremism, and reforms. Now, counter-terrorism we have been largely successful at, but counter-extremism and reforms, including for instance, the reform of the criminal justice system, so that we can finally get rid of the military courts. Once again, we hear this current government is also saying that it will probably extend the duration of the military courts for another 2 years. So I think someone has to sit down, and since the Prime Minister holds the portfolio of the Interior Ministry also, someone has to sit down and rethink this entire thing, because as Mohit said, if we become complacent, then we are setting ourselves up for another bout of terrorist attacks.
I think the first priority was to deal with violence, and that we have done, I think, in a way that I think no other army has fought with the terrorists the way we had evicted them from our area. They were all occupying about 19 administrative units. So about extremism, I think it will take a very long time because Pakistani's mindset have been, brought to this level, I think, in 25 years. So it is not going to happen, with these within 2-3 years. It will take a lot of time. There are generations who have grown up and they have been taught in the syllabus things and about jihad and about religion. So I think it will take time, but the basic thing which was a which was a danger to the existence of Pakistan that we have dealt with. Now the reforms, I think the police that was in 2001 and the police in 2018, there is a lot of difference. They were not trained to fight those kind of terrorists, but they have improved, especially the KP police, and there have been reforms in every aspects of criminal justice system. But it is not that easy to change a system with so many different kind of people who would oppose that that change in the system. So I think this point action plan, what our success is that we have reduced these violent incidents to a great extent, and this is a success story. And the other things I think it will take a lot of time. It's not going to happen within a year or 2 years.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. And let me also say that former Major General Ejaz Haider has also joined us. We'll go to him. But here's the thing, Brigadier Munir. Yes, I agree. It's going to take a long time because we've been doing this. And in fact, state policies have been doing this setting up this mindset over the last 30, 35 years. So it's not going to change overnight. But the other thing is that we have to actually start doing some work, because if you're talking about syllabi, so then we have to actually go and start looking at the syllabi and start doing something about the syllabi. And we are not really doing that. Similarly, ditto for the criminal justice system. We are talking about reforms in the criminal justice system, but we are not really doing much to reform the criminal justice system so that we can actually get rid of the military courts and have the judiciary deal with these issues. But stay with me. I'm going to pull in General Haider. General Haider, welcome to the program. So we're talking about the distance that we have covered over 16 years in terms of our counterterrorism efforts. And one of the things that my panelists agree with is the fact that we have largely been able to eradicate violence, but there are two other ends of the strategic triangle which we are still grappling with. What is your sense, since you've also worked at the Inter-Services Intelligence Directorate and then commanded a division in Balochistan, so you have your practical experience of dealing with these things. How do you think we have fared over the years?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ejaz, thank you very much for having me on your show. I think in one sentence, if I have to say, 2018 has been a good year relatively. And I don't want to go into the details. I have all the details with me in terms of how we have arrived at this position. Pakistan perhaps is the only country that can truly claim to be a success in war on terror as compared to the other countries. What is happening or what has happened in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Iraq, and all these countries, where do they stand and where do we stand? A series of operations you are aware of. You are aware of the environment and geography of FATA. Where did we start? 9/11, Operation Al-Mizan, Rai Haq, Rai Nijat, Rai Rast, Operation Sherdil, Koi Safed, Star, Operation Khyber, series of Operation Khyber, last Zarb-e-Azb, and now ongoing Radul Fasad. Over 4,500 soldiers have laid their lives, 15,500 have injured, 17,000 militants have got killed. Numerous, I have the complete figures with me, but let me come to the facts and figure of 2018 comparatively with 2017 so that you and your audience can fully comprehend as to where do we stand today, and we can be very happy about, where do we stand today. In 2017, we had a total of 420, strange figure, 420 militant attacks as compared to 229 in 2018, a 45% of decline in the militant attacks. In deaths, we had 912 deaths in 2017 as against 571 in 2018. A total of 37% decline. Similarly, in the injuries, we have 1,877 in 2017 as against 959 in 2018, 49%. Overall, Balochistan has received the major brunt, 99 attacks, 354 killed, 570 injured. 43% of total attacks across the country happened in Balochistan. 61% of total deaths across the country in 2018 took place in Balochistan. 59% of the injuries across the entire country happened in Balochistan, followed by FATA and KPK, Sindh, Punjab, Gilgit-Baltistan. The suicide bombers have also declined. We had 23 suicide bombers in 2017 against 18 in 2018. So we have really figured quite well, despite the fact that some unfortunate incidents close to the elections took place in which we lost some political leaders as well as other citizens. So overall, we have fared quite well in 2018, I believe, as for the data that we have been able to monitor in our think tank.
Ejaz Khattak, tell me, because you served in Balochistan, both in the capacity of an intelligence officer and also as a Div commander, there is this sense among the civilian enclave that while we're trying to curb the sectarian attacks in Punjab and also in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, they have now, some of these groups, perhaps Lashkar-e-Jhangvi and Lashkar-e-Jhangvi Al-Alami, have morphed into the ISIS mode, and they're still killing the Hazaras and other Shia communities in Balochistan. So can you give us a sense of what the dynamics of sectarianism in Balochistan are?
Actually, the dynamics of sectarianism in Balochistan and even the other militancy in Balochistan has international dynamics. It is not restricted to the sectarianism that is taking place in Punjab or elsewhere in the country. It is being exploited by the international players for the obvious reasons of what's happening in Balochistan. So I don't see, because I am fully aware of the strength and capabilities and potentials of the sectarian clout of the Baloch people in Balochistan. I'm fully aware of that, and I know that they just cannot operate without the support that is due to them from outside the borders. So, and it is having a larger sort of interest of people in the region as well as in the extra region. So I would rather link that to the overall geography of Balochistan and overall development and what is happening in Balochistan and in the region. I try to link that to that, not giving it some sort of a specific touch from the point of view of the Baloch militancy in Balochistan.
Okay. I'm going to take a short break, and at the other end of the break, we'll continue with our discussion of 2018 counterterrorism efforts and also overall CT and counter-extremism efforts by Pakistan in the last 16 years, ever since this war started. Stay with us. Welcome back to Indus Special. We're discussing 2018 counter-terrorism and counter-extremism efforts, how we have fared over the last 16 years and what the projection for the future is. IGP Shaukat Javed, General Khattak is talking about the international dimension. Yes, there is an international dimension. But exploitation by hostile agencies is essentially a function of internal fault lines. So if you don't have fault lines, they cannot be exploited. But if you do have fault lines, they will be exploited, especially when Balochistan, Balochistan's geopolitical dimensions are such that a number of external players are interested in trying to get Balochistan to either remain troubled or to also get Balochistan to separate from Pakistan. So once again, since I was talking about the police, in Balochistan, we don't have, 95% of Balochistan is not under the police because you've got the A and B areas thing going on. As a police officer, and also as a matter of fact, a former army officer, do tell me whether this particular configuration in Balochistan is workable. Should we change it? Should we continue with it? What should we do?
No, I think you have very rightly pointed out. Look at what we are doing with FATA. We are merging it with Khyber Pakhtunkhwa.
Yeah.
We have already started with the efforts to merge all such areas which are there and to the mainstream. So I would say that if you talk about the National Action Plan, then only 3 points were attended to properly, and those were the kinetic actions by the military, Then was the establishment of military courts and their award of sentences to the culprits. And the third was the Karachi operation.
Correct.
Rest 17 points were not touched.
Yeah.
And we have done what we have done to make fully functional NECTA. The answer is not much.
The answer is zip, zilch, and zero.
Right. Yeah. And what we have done for the Madaris reforms, we have put it on the back burner.
We've been doing this since 2003, 2004.
Right.
Yeah.
The Madaris organizations are ready to cooperate with the government. They are ready to implement those reforms which will be mutually agreed upon. But the government is somehow dilly-dallying on every occasion, and those reforms are not being taken forward. We have not done anything to improve the criminal justice system. Even the Chief Justice of Pakistan, on a number of occasions, and the next senior most judge who's going to be the Chief Justice, Mr. Justice Khosa, they have said that there are many flaws in the laws of the country which are helping the accused persons. For example, we are depending upon the ocular evidence only, and the circumstantial and forensic evidence is ignored by our Evidence Act.
Even though, do we not have probably Asia's largest forensic laboratory in Lahore?
Fortunately, we made one.
Yeah.
But now that lab is overworked.
Because everyone is sending samples from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa.
I think now is the time that each province must have a similar type of lab, and there should be a federal lab also dealing with these things. So I was talking about we have not done anything about the money laundering laws. Now the government is thinking of doing something
Mohit
about
was
that.
talking about FATF, Financial Action Task Force, commitments that we have made.
So we are lacking badly where the civilian response is concerned. We have achieved successes in the military actions, but even now we are just handing over the civilian authorities to Insawat.
The administration to the civilian
authorities. How much time
authorities.
it will take in the South Waziristan and North Waziristan, only God knows.
Yeah, it took more than 10 years.
Balochistan, 90% of or 85% of the total area is B area. Yeah. There should be a plan to slowly and gradually merge it with the mainstream. You will be surprised to know, Ejaz, that there is a tribal area in Punjab also.
Yeah.
And that tribal area
southwestern Punjab
adjoins two districts of Rajanpur and Dera Ghazi Khan. And it is an illegal tribal area. But somehow there are some vested interests which do not allow successive governments to reform those areas and to merge them with the mainstream. And similarly, the capacity building of the police is very, very essential. If we don't build the capacity of police, then we will have to call paramilitary and military even for the smaller unrest taking place in the settled areas. The example of Karachi is in front of you. About more than 2 decades now that the Rangers is there. Yeah. It is about 30 years, would, if I am not wrong. But we have not improved the police. We have not even implemented a similar law of the police. We have made a rigmarole.
A hodgepodge of various laws. Yes. Sindh has actually gone back to the 1861 Police Act.
And the Sindh High Court has taken cognizance of that. There is an appeal lying in the Supreme Court. And now I think the only concrete action was taken by the Chief Justice under Pakistan Law and Justice Commission, that he formed a Police Reforms Committee, which is now working, and probably they have, I am a member of that committee. And we have submitted our first report to the Pakistan Law and Justice Commission, and that's the only ray of hope.
That's the only ray of hope. But let me, Brigadier Munir, sir, when you were doing intelligence operations in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and also in FATA, clearly, you were also collaborating with the police. So I want to get your sense of the police performance when you were gathering intelligence, collating it, analyzing it, and then executing plans.
I think their performance was simply excellent. All operations we conducted with the help of police, they were 100% success. in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, different areas of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. They were, very well trained. We were dealing with at that time, there was CID. And their people, their men, they were very well trained. They would bring all the equipment. We never told them that where we are going or which is the target. So we will lead them and they would deliver. None of the operation, failed with them. So KP Police, I have worked with them for a long time, even in this TNSM movement. And then while I was there in the, in the intelligence agencies. Now, the most important thing now, I think, is that we have to formulate a strategy to deal with the situation which may arise with the withdrawal of US forces from Afghanistan, as announced by Trump. There are people are there, TTP remnants, IS is there. They are in 5 provinces of Afghanistan. And once US withdraws all its troops completely, I think there is going to be a law and order situation, and there is in Afghanistan, which is directly going to affect us. So we have to be prepared to deal with these people, our TTP elements. Before that, if something can be done about them, whether some of them wants to surrender or to weaken them. Because I think that they are going to be strengthened once there is violence and there is, total breakup of, law in Afghanistan. And that is likely to happen, so we should be prepared for that.
I also need to ask you another question, and I will ask the same question to IGP Shaukat Javed also. Recently, some clerics were taken to North Waziristan by the army, and they were obviously conducted there by the division that is deployed there. And there was a lot of, criticism of the move in the social media, because there was the ASWJ Supreme Spiritual Leader, Ahmad Ludhianvi there. But there was also Allama Amin Shahidi, who was a Shia scholar. And and this was, to me, a very strong signal to the Deosalfi cadres that this was the area that they controlled, and now this area is under the control and writ of the state, and the state is signaling to them. What would you say to the criticism on social media of this particular move?
I think the criticism is mainly from the dissidents who are not aware that this type of thing has been happening in Pakistan since ages. In 58, 1962, 1964, and then in 73 insurgency. They fought with us and they were given general amnesty. Mir Hazar Khan Ramkhani, who was leader of Baloch insurgency, he went to Afghanistan and ultimately he was pardoned. Similarly, the Pashtun nationalists, they went to Afghanistan in 70s and they conducted terrorist activities in KP. They established camp, and out of those, they ultimately became member of parliament, and some of them were inducted in the cabinet. So you can't, as you wrote, you can't kill all the baddies. You have to use two-pronged strategy. The one who are convinced, who wants to lay on, you talk to them, and the one who you cannot convince, you fight with them. So this is how you can deal with terrorists.
This is essentially a standard counterinsurgency / counterterrorism template, that you have 2 prongs, you're fighting those that are not going to, that you cannot wean from violence. But there are others that you can talk to, you can co-opt them, you can get them to collaborate with you. There is nothing, I mean, it's not something that we have discovered today. This has been done in various parts of the world. But there was a lot of criticism. And some of the criticism also had to do with what people said, the wrong optics of it. So when you saw the pictures, what was your take on that?
No, I would say that there are 2 points which we must take into consideration. First is to stop the youth of this country to join hands the terrorist organizations. Now, how to stop them? For this purpose, we have to create jobs, we have to make one system of education, we have to bring about large-scale education reforms, and we have to do many other things which stops them to joining those forces. Unfortunately, there is a presumption, and probably rightly so, that Madaris provides fodder to these organizations. And as I mentioned earlier also, that we have not done anything to reform the Madaris and to look into deeply
and that is something that we need to
in
do.
their syllabus. The second thing is that all those who were arrested or captured during the kinetic operations by the police or by military organizations, there are only 2 camps of rehabs in the country at the moment, according to my information, which are functioning. One in Sawat and the other is somewhere in Fata.
Yeah.
And those camps are doing a wonderful job. There is a need to expand this exercise all over the country, and then to bring them back to the mainstream. Probably this effort which you were mentioning, that few clerks were taken to South Waziristan and North Waziristan,
yeah.
and they were shown the successes of the military operations, and they were taken there because they are the people who help government and who listen to us, and who are ready to cooperate with the government. For example, you mentioned about Ludhianvi, and Ludhianvi is the one who does not allow derogatory slogans against Shias wherever he is addressing.
Yeah.
So that type of cooperation we are getting from them. We must work further consolidate these efforts. There is a need to expanding those efforts also.
There's need to expand them. We are also joined by Rahimullah Yusufzai, a resident editor of the News from Peshawar. Rahimullah Yusufzai, thank you so much. We were just talking about the counter-terrorism efforts in 2018 and trying to juxtapose them with the last 16 years when we started on this war and the kind of distance that we have covered. What is your sense of the successes and failures in the last year?
I think it has taken rather long, 16 years as you mentioned. So it means it was very tough, very challenging. And, we began in 2003 and it's not over yet, I will say, although we have covered most of the ground. I believe that, the major military operations have already ended. Now we have to tackle the consequences of these military operations and of militancy. So, there was repatriation of people, then the next challenge was rehabilitation and resettlement and all these. And these are still ongoing issues which have to be tackled. There's a lack of resources, sometimes there's a lack of focus. Another consequence was the emergence of the PTM, the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement. And the people who are leading it, they say that they have suffered a lot. And this is also accepted, by the government, that they have really suffered. So they tried to sell their narrative. They were engaged by the government, by the military. But some of the problems which they highlighted remain unresolved. We have been able to take back, to seize back every territory, every village and hamlet which was earlier controlled by the militants. That was actually achieved earlier, before 2018, but I think this was the consolidation phase. So the gains have been consolidated, and now the resettlement and reconstruction and the infrastructure development, all these things are being tackled. So I think the fight is not yet over. One encouraging thing was the
fight is not over. The fight is not over. I agree with you, but I also am very interested in getting your take on the code of conduct that TTP issued in September after the killing of Fazlullah and the leadership going back to the Masood tribe. When you read that code of conduct, it seems that the TTP is now very aware of the indiscipline and the fissures in its ranks, and the fact that they have unnecessarily been targeting soft targets and the rest of it, and they are quite desperate to regroup. Is that your sense also after reading that code of conduct that they put out in September?
I think it was a propaganda effort, I will say, because, they don't follow what they say.
Yeah.
And this code of conduct, I think, is merely on paper. I don't think they really mean it. And, they have never really condemned any of their actions in the past. So I think we should take as that they have lost ground. They're on the retreat in a way. So they had to come up with these things, to try to win back public opinion, especially in the critical areas where they earlier were in control. But I think it's a losing effort. It won't make much of an impact. But I was talking about this counter-narrative, Paigam-e-Pakistan, which came up in January last year. That was very significant. 1829 ulama in Pakistan coming together and putting out this, Paigam-e-Pakistan, the message of Pakistan, and declaring as, un-Islamic the suicide bombing and fighting against the state.
Correct.
And the prerogative should be only with the state to declare jihad. And then also saying that Pakistan's soil should not be used for attacks against other countries. I thought this was a very significant statement which came out, but it was not really publicized the way it should have been done.
I think you are absolutely right. It should have been further publicized. Thank you so much, Rahimullah Yousafzai, for speaking with us. Before I wrap up, quickly, Brigadier Asad Munir, do you think that the kinetic operations, including the intelligence-based operations, have actually put TTP in disarray and it is desperately trying to regroup?
Yes, I think so. They are in Afghanistan, but there are, such signals that most of them, they don't want to fight, especially the foot soldiers. And some of them, they want to surrender, and a large number of them. So, but I think if the situation in Afghanistan, there is such situation arises after the withdrawal of U.S. forces, and there is violence, and there is in Afghanistan. So they may regroup along with the, IS and other factions which are anti-Afghan Taliban. So they can. They have to be, we should be mentally prepared to deal with them in case they reorganize and they are threatening again Pakistan.
Okay. IGP Shaukat Javed, we need reforms. We need to go back to the National Action Plan points, see what we have been able to do, and then sit down and start doing work on what we have not done. Is that correct, going in 2019?
Yes, you are absolutely right, because the military has done its part, the paramilitary has done its parts. The portion of the police department, which is called counter-terrorism departments, they have done their role, and now is the time that the civilian response must come forthwith and in a very, very loud manner. And when I say civilian response, we must have a mechanism of coordination, issuing of our policies, updating them in NECTA, and then the Madaris reforms, the education reforms, and the reforms to stop money laundering and all money-related crimes which are taking
the white
place.
Collar,
the white collar.
Yeah.
So these reforms and these civilian efforts should be very pronounced, I would say, if we want to consolidate the gains which the military operations have got.
Should be pronounced, but they are not pronounced as yet.
At the moment, they are not. They have not even started.
And this, despite the fact that the new governments has always said that its mandate is essentially grounded in its ability or its desire to do things differently from previous governments. So if they want to do things differently, perhaps it's time for them to start doing this. But one last question. The Prime Minister holds the Interior Minister's portfolio. Now, given the internal security threat and given the very weighty sort of task of Interior Minister. Do you think there should be a full-fledged Interior Minister and the Prime Minister should hand over the portfolio to someone else?
No, I think it is up to the Prime Minister the way he wants to run this, the Ministry of Interior. If he wants to keep it with himself, there is no harm in that.
Do you think he will have, because as the Prime Minister, he has to deal with a number of other things.
But if he wants to focus especially on Interior, so there is no harm in that. But my point is that all those actions which are required to be taken, for example, as an Interior Minister, he should order NECTA to go to the Prime Minister's Secretariat, start reporting to the National Security Advisor rather than to the Interior Minister.
Yeah, but there is no National Security Advisor.
Oh, he should appoint one.
Yeah, so they basically said that, you know, we don't really need the National Security Advisor. But very quickly, Brigadier Munir, sir, do you think the Prime Minister should hold the Interior portfolio or should he have a full-fledged minister to do it?
You know, the Interior Ministeriate is confined only to the Islamabad Capital Territory. Law and order is a provincial subject. This, ministry has always been, their power has been overestimated. He doesn't have any, this intelligence organization with him. FIA, it is basically, not an intelligence organization. The ministry has only Islamabad police. So even if the Prime Minister is, I think, is keeping that portfolio with the State Minister, I think they can deliver.
In which case, I think we need to also reconfigure the Interior Ministry, something along the lines perhaps of Homeland Security. But thank you so much, Brigadier Munir, IGP Shaukat Javed. This is all for today. We will see you tomorrow with other content. Until then, goodbye.